Hello and welcome to another reading of Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This is now going into our part 7, and I'm going to try and do something a little bit different so it's more soft spoken instead of whisper. Let me know if you guys enjoy this or if you would prefer a more whispered tone, and we can do that. But let's get into it. Sure, she said, leaping up and relinquishing the seat. The woman in the dress's reappearance was impeccably timed, coinciding with a switch in Kataki's mood. Eyes swollen from crying, she looked at Kazu and Kei. She held up the letter that Kazu had just read and waved it. "So there you have it," she said with a grin. Kei responded by nodding, her brown, bright eyes still streaming tears like a waterfall. "What have I been doing?" Kataki mumbled, looking at the letter. "Kataki?" Kei sniffed, looking worried. Kataki neatly folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. "I'm going home," she said, in a bold, confident voice. Kazu gave a small nod. Kei was still sniffing. Kataki looked at the teary-eyed Kei, who had cried longer than she had. She smiled as she thought that Kei must be getting pretty dehydrated, and let out a deep breath. No longer looking lost, she seemed empowered. She pulled out her purse from her shoulder bag on the counter and handed Kazu 380 yen in coins. "Thanks," she said. With a calm expression, Kazu returned her smile. Kataki gave a quick nod and walked towards the entrance. She stepped lightly. She was in a hurry to see Fusagi's face. She passed through the doorway and out of sight. "Ah," she said, and doubled back into the cafe. Kazu and Kei looked at her inquiringly. "One more thing," she said. "Starting tomorrow, no more calling me by my maiden name, okay?" She grinned broadly. It was Kataki who had originally requested that she be called by her maiden name. When Fusagi started calling her Kataki, she wanted to avoid confusion, but such consideration was not necessary now. A smile returned to Kei's face, and her bright eyes opened widely. "Okay, got you," she said happily. "Tell everyone else too," said Kataki, and without waiting for a reply, she waved and left. "Okay," said Kazu, as if speaking to herself, and put the money from Kataki in the till. Kei cleaned away the cups that Kataki had drunk from, and went into the kitchen to get a refill for the woman in the dress. The clank-clank sound of the keys of the cash register reverberated through the cool room. The ceiling fan continued to rotate silently. Kei returned and poured a new coffee for the woman in the dress. "We appreciate your presence again this summer," she whispered. The woman in the dress continued to read her novel and did not reply. Kei placed her hand on her own stomach and smiled. Summer was just getting started. A girl was sitting quietly in that seat. She looked old enough to be in high school. She had large, sweet eyes. She was wearing a beige turtleneck with a tartan-checked miniskirt, black tights and moss-brown boots. A duffel coat hung on the back of her chair. Her clothes could have been worn by an adult, but there was something childlike about her expression. Her hair was cut into a bob to her jawline. She wore no makeup, but her naturally long eyelashes accentuated her pretty features. Although she came from the future, there was nothing that would have prevented her from passing in public as someone from the present, if it hadn't been for that rule that said that anyone visiting from the future must stay in that seat. As it was early August, her clothes would, however, have looked terribly out of season. It was still a mystery as to who she had come to meet. Right now, the only person in the cafe was Nagari Katika. The large-framed man with narrow eyes was wearing a cook's uniform and standing behind the counter. But the cafe proprietor didn't seem to be who the girl had come to meet. Although her eyes were looking at Nagari, they showed no sign of emotion towards him. She seemed to be totally indifferent to his existence, but at the same time no one else was in the cafe. Nagari stood there looking at her with his arms crossed. Nagari was a large man. Any ordinary girl, or woman for that matter, might have felt a little threatened sitting in that small cafe, alone with him. But the untroubled expression on this girl's face suggested that she couldn't care less. The girl and Nagari had exchanged no words. The girl had been doing nothing except occasionally glancing at one of the clocks on the wall, as if she was worried about time. Suddenly Nagari's nose twitched it and his right eye opened wider. A ching from the toaster in the kitchen rang out. Food was ready. He went into the kitchen and began busily preparing something. The girl didn't pay any attention to the noise and took a sip of her coffee. She nodded as if to say yes. The coffee must have still been warm, as her expression suggested that she had plenty of time. Nagari came out of the kitchen. He was carrying a rectangular tray with toast and butter, salad, and fruit yogurt on it. The butter was homemade, his specialty. His butter was so good that the woman in colours, Yai Kohire, would come in for some, armed with a plastic container. Nagari got a lot of joy from watching the customers' delight as they ate his delicious butter. The problem was that although he used the most expensive ingredients, the butter was free for customers. He didn't charge for condiments. He was very particular about that. These high standards of his were quite a problem. Still holding the tray, he stood in front of the girl. His large tray must have seemed like a giant wall to the petite girl seated there. He looked down at her. "Who did you come to meet?" he asked, getting straight to the point. The girl looked up at the giant wall standing there. She casually stared at him. He was used to his huge size causing surprise and apprehension in those who didn't know him. It felt strange now that he didn't have this effect. "What?" he asked. But the girl didn't offer much of a response. "No one in particular," she just said, and took another sip of coffee. She wouldn't engage with him at all. Tilting his head to one side, he gracefully placed the tray on the table for the girl, and then returned to his place behind the counter. The girl looked uncomfortable. Excuse me," she called to Nagari. "What? I didn't order this," the girl said awkwardly, pointing to the toast in front of her. "On the house," he said, with pride. The girl looked at all the free food in disbelief. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward with both hands on the counter. "Well, you've made all the effort to come from the future. I can't have a girl like you going back without serving you anything," he said, perhaps expecting at least a thank you. But the girl just kept staring at him and didn't even smile. He felt obliged to respond. "Is there a problem?" he said, a bit rattled. "No, thank you, I'll eat it," had a girl. "Well, why wouldn't I?" The girl expertly spread the butter on the toast and took a hungry mouthful. She kept on munching. She had a wonderful way of eating. He was waiting for the girl's reactions. Naturally, he thought, she would show her delight upon eating his boast-worthy butter, but she did not react as he had anticipated. She carried on eating without changing her expression. When he finished the toast, she started crunching on the salad and gobbling down the fruit yogurt. On finishing, the girl just folded her arms in thanks for the food, without having made a single comment. Nagari was crestfallen. It was Kazu. She handed the keyring with a wad of keys to Nagari behind the counter. "I'm back," she said, stopping mid-word when she noticed the girl in that seat. "Hey," replied Nagari, pocketing the keyring. He didn't say, "Hey, welcome back," like he normally would. Kazu grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Who's she?" "I've been trying to find out," he replied. Normally Kazu wouldn't particularly pay much attention to who was sitting there. When someone appeared, she could easily tell that the person had come from the future to meet someone. It was not something she interfered in. But never had such a young, pretty girl sat in a chair before. She couldn't help but openly stare at her. The staring did not go unnoticed. "Hello," said the girl, offering a pleasant smile. Nagari's left eyebrow twitched in annoyance that she hadn't offered such a smile to him. Did you come to meet someone? Said Kazu. Yeah, I guess, the girl conceded. Hearing this conversation, Nagari tightened his lips. He had asked the same question just moments earlier, and the girl had said no. He wasn't amused. But they're not here, are they? He said crossly, turning away. So who was she planning to meet? Kazu wondered as she tapped her index finger against her chin. Huh? Surely it wasn't him. She pointed the chin-tapping finger towards Nagari. Nagari pointed at himself. Me? He folded his arms and muttered, as if he was trying to remember the circumstances surrounding the girl's appearance. The girl had appeared on that seat about 10 minutes ago. Kay had needed to go to the gynecology clinic, so Kazu had driven her up there. Normally Nagari would take Kay to her regular checkups, but today was different. He considered the gynecology clinic to be a sanctuary for women only, where no man should venture. That's why he was manning the cafe alone. Did she choose a time when only I was working? His heart lifted at the thought. So perhaps the way she's been until now is down to her being embarrassed. Stroking his chin, he nodded as if it all made sense. He sprang from the counter and sat down in the chair facing the girl. The girl stared back at him blankly. He no longer looked like the person he'd been until a moment ago. If her coldness towards me is just out of shyness, I'll try to be more approachable, he thought, and grinned broadly. He leaned forward on his elbows in an easygoing way. So, was it me you came to visit? He asked the girl. No way. Me? You came to meet me? No. Me? No. The girl was adamant. Kazu heard the exchange and came to a simple conclusion. Well, you're completely rolled out. Again, Nagari was deflated. Okay, so it's not me, he said sulkily, as he trudged back to the counter. The girl seemed to find this amusing, let out cheeky giggle. When the bell rang, the girl looked at the clock in the middle of the hall. This clock in the middle was the only one that was accurate. The other two were either slow or fast. She must have known that. The girl's eyes were fixed on the entrance. A moment later, Kay walked into the cafe. Thanks, Kazu dear, she said as she entered. She was wearing an aqua-coloured dress and strappy sandals, and was fanning herself with a straw hat. She had gone out with Kazu, but judging from the plastic shopping bag she was holding, she must have popped into the convenience store nearby before coming into the cafe. Kay was by nature a carefree person, always charming and never shy. She was comfortable with the most intimidating of customers. She would be friendly and outgoing, even when communicating with a foreigner who spoke no Japanese. When Kay noticed the girl sitting in that seat, she said, "Hello, welcome," while wearing a big smile. Her smile was beaming even more than normal, and the tone of her voice was a little higher too. The girl straightened in her chair and bowed her head a little, keeping her gaze on Kay. Kay responded with a smile and trotted towards the back room. So how was it? Nagari asked Kay. Given where she and Kazu had just returned from, there could only be one thing that he wanted to know. Kay patted her still flat stomach, and gave him the peace sign and smiled. Ah, right then, he said. He narrowed his eyes further and gave two small nods. When he felt joy, he found himself unable to express his happiness openly. Knowing this all too well, Kay looked on at his reaction with contentment. With keenly observing eyes, the girl in that seat watched this exchange warmly. Kay didn't seem to notice how the girl was watching her, and began walking back to the back room. As if this was some kind of cue, the girl called out in an unexpected loud noise, "Excuse me." Kay stopped in her tracks and answered unthinkingly, "Yes." She turned and looked at the girl with her round, bright eyes. The girl self-consciously averted her eyes and began fidgeting. "What is it?" Kay asked. The girl looked up as if she indeed wanted something. Her smile was honest and sweet. The cool distance she expressed towards Nagari had vanished entirely. It's just..." "Yes, what is it?" "I'd like to take my photo with you." Kay blinked, startled by the girl's words. "With me?" she said. "Yes." Nagari immediately responded, "With her?" he asked, pointing to Kay. "Yes," said the girl cheerily. "Are you saying that you came to see her?" asked Kazu. "Yes." Kay's eyes beamed brightly at this unknown girl's sudden confession. Kay was never suspicious of strangers, so rather than asking the girl who she was or why she wanted the photo, she immediately said, "Oh, really? Can I fix my makeup first?" She pulled out her gaze from her shoulder bag and began fixing her makeup. There's no time," the girl said utterly. "Oh, no, of course." Naturally, Kay knew the rules well. Her cheeks flushed as she snapped the case shut. The girl was prevented from positioning herself alongside Kay, as you would normally do when asking for a photo, with the rule prohibiting her to move from that seat. Kay passed a convenience store plastic bag and straw hat to Kazu and stood next to the girl. "Where's your camera?" asked Kazu. The girl pushed something towards her across the table. "Huh? Is that a camera?" asked Kay in surprise. As Kazu looked at the camera and handed it to her, it had the dimensions of a business card, wafer thin and semi-transparent. It almost looked like a plastic card. Kay was fascinated by it. She took a close look at it from all angles. "It's so thin. We have to hurry. Time is almost up," the girl said calmly to Kay. "Yes, I'm sorry," said Kay, shrugging her shoulders and standing alongside the girl again. "Okay, I'm taking it." Kazu pointed the camera at the two. It didn't seem difficult to use. She just pressed the button and it appeared on the screen. Click. "What? Wait a bit. Where are you going to take it?" said Kay. Kazu had just taken a picture while Kay was adjusting her hair and arranging her fringe. She handed the camera back to the girl. "You already took it. When did you do that?" The girl and Kazu were both very businesslike. Kay alone was full of questions and confused. "Thank you very much," said the girl and immediately drank the remainder of her coffee. "What? Just a minute," said Kay, but the girl vaporized into the steam. As the steam rose towards the ceiling, the woman in the dress appeared from underneath it. It looked like a transformation trick worthy of a ninja. As all three were used to such things happening, no one was particularly surprised. If another customer had seen it, they would have been shocked. If a customer ever did see such a thing, they would be told it was a parlor trick. Though if the cafe staff were asked how they performed this trick, they would be unable to provide an answer. The woman in the dress was reading her novel casually as if nothing had happened. However, when she noticed the tray, she pushed it away with her right hand, which clearly meant, "Take that away." When Kay went to clean up the tray, Nagari took it from her, tilted her head to one side and disappeared into the kitchen. "I wonder who that was," Kay muttered. She retrieved the plastic convenience store bag and straw hat from Kazu and retreated to the back room. Kazu kept staring at that chair where the woman in the dress was sitting. It was clear by the look on her face that something was bothering her. This was the first time a customer had come from the future to meet Nagari, Kay, or Kazu. There had never seemed to be a good reason why anyone would want to go back in time to see one of the cafe staff's members who were always in the cafe. Yet a girl had just come from the future to meet Kay. Kazu didn't interrogate or press anyone on why they had visited from the future. Even if, say, a murderer travelled back in time, she would have a good reason to leave it alone. The rule was that the present doesn't change no matter how much one tries to rearrange things in the past. This rule could never be broken. A series of random events would always somehow unfold to prevent the present from changing. If, for example, a gunman came from the future and fatally shot a customer, as long as the customer was living in the future, he could not die, even if he had been shot in the heart. That was the rule. Kazu, or whoever was there, would call the ambulance or the police. The ambulance would leave for the cafe, the ambulance would not get caught in traffic, the ambulance would travel from the emergency centre to the cafe and carry the patient from the cafe to the hospital, using the shortest distance and in the fastest time. While looking at the patient, the hospital staff might say, "We probably can't save him." Even if that happened, then a world-leading surgeon would happen to be visiting the hospital and would operate on the patient. Even if the victim's blood was a rare type, that only one in several 10,000 possessed, there would be a stock of such blood at that hospital. Surgery staff would be excellent, and the operation would be successful. The surgeon might say, "later," but if the ambulance had been 1 minute later, or if the bullet had been located 1 millimeter to the left, the patient would have not survived. All the staff would say that it was a miracle